12.3 Clayton Structure Plan, Councillor Hua.
I move the notice of motion as shown on the agenda, page 497.
Thank you, Councillor Hua. Is there a councillor to second that? Councillor Besley. Councillor Hua.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I move that officer prepares a report on the needs for further strategic planning work and the potential preparing of a structural plan for Clayton South, which should include but not limited to the following areas: the West Hall Activity Centre, future plans for the remaining industrial site in Clayton South, the future plan for non-Greenwich landfill sites, traffic, residents, amenity, street, tree planting, open space, and passive and active recreation. And one of the most important reasons for raising this motion is we've had this big proposal to redevelop the Clayton Business Park in Clayton South, which is a large, significant site with an area of 300,000 square metres. And due to its location right next to the West Hall station and adjacent to the existing industrial sites along Centre Road and West Hall Road, this development itself is a very significant piece. It will change the entire look and feel in Clayton South, and it's going to have apartments, townhouses, and a new town centre, retail space, supermarket, and food shops there. It's going to create about more than 100,000 new extra population and extra 12,000 working population. So it's nearly double the population in Clayton South. That's why I think we really need to look into the proposal, and our officers should really work on it, and for this to better plan it and really plan it, and to figure out what are these 100,000 new population going to bring to us, and who are they, and whether they are young families, they're single person or young professional, or they're students, and what's this additional population going to do for our local amenity and schools and traffics, and whether there's extra needs for open space and passive and active recreation. So that is the main reason for bringing up this motion. And of course we want to, since we're going to have a new activity centre, a new town centre at West Hall, and the West Hall station is no longer going to be one of the quiet station on Dandenong Line. It's going to become a lot more busier. So that's why the more strategic work on that and its impact on the surrounding area is very important, I think. And so council needs to take the lead to plan for our future rather than us leaving it to the developer to tell us what they want to build on the site. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hua. Councillor Besley.
Thanks. I'm really supportive of this because I have heard from people, while this is not my ward, I've actually heard from people in Clayton South who are apprehensive of the changes that are going to take place. While they are excited about some, they're not sure about others, and I think if they feel that there's some real planning in place, that we're on the forefront with this, that'll be a really good thing. And I know Councillor Hua, he's very active in the Clayton South community, and I think this will really help those residents to feel that we are listening to them, and that while there are some exciting changes taking place, there are also, any time that you increase population and in an area, there's also some other things such as residential amenity and traffic and open space concerns that we really need to address and make sure that we're planning for. So I think this is, it's asking for a report, and I think we should be supportive of this, and I thank Councillor Hua for this notice of motion.
Thank you, Councillor Besley. Are there any other councillors that wish to comment? Councillor Ox.
Look, I just had a few questions, just through to the relevant officer, which I assume is Mr. Gutman. Do we have any type of idea, and noting that this is asking for a report on the matter, of what this type of structure plan would cost in terms of money and then in terms of time? Because it seems like we don't typically do structure plans for whole suburbs, so that's, I suppose, my only concern here.
Mr. Gutman, are you able to provide an indicative costing of what a structure plan is, noting that it says shall include but not limited, and then all the points of what it will cover off underneath?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it'd be a very difficult question to answer at this point in time, given the scale of the intended task. We'd probably need to do some more work on costing each of the items in the notice of motion, mindful of the scale of the geographical area proposed by the notice of motion.
Mr. Gutman, would you imagine it to be the cost of doing an analysis of one particular disc golf site, or is it a larger piece of strategic work? Like, where does it fall in the spectrum? Is it a $5,000 piece, tens of thousands, hundreds, millions?
My recent experience, Mr. Mayor, has been Moorabbin, Cheltenham and Mentone, where most of the work was done in-house, but we did have retail economics and transport studies that cost about $30,000 each. They were essentially restricted to the commercial one parts of those activity centres and the residential edges. I suspect we're talking in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to look at an entire suburb and look at all these issues in that level of detail.
Thank you, Mr. Gutman. Councillor Oxley.
I suppose in light of that, my concern in having a structure plan for an entire suburb is that there are specific things that Councillor Hua has mentioned that he would really like to focus on. And I think if we're then looking at a whole suburb, we have a planning department that is busy as it is, that we're looking at our VCAT rates in terms of decisions that are made within statutory timeframes that are just getting lower and lower, and while that's not the planning department's fault, the more we keep loading them up with work on structure plans for entire suburbs, I think it's a concept I'm happy to support in terms of looking at what we do in specific areas, particularly the business areas of Clayton South. I think to look at a structure plan for an entire suburb is probably a little bit unrealistic, but if it's something that we can look at and fine-tune in terms of where we'd like to look at structure planning, it's something I would be willing to support in the future, but for an entire suburb, it's something I can't support tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Oxley. Councillor Bath?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be... I don't support the motion as it stands on screen because overall I do have an issue with notice of motions that we see coming to council that are cherry-picking projects over and above everything else. Now, a concept that's very close to my heart is of opportunity cost. Every time we pull out a project out of thin air, we put it above or in front of the other strategic projects that have been prioritised, that have been budgeted, that are working through a system, etc. Now, I have complete faith and confidence in our planning department. It is headed up by Mr. Gutman, who's got 20-something years of planning experience. We've got Mr. Paul Marsden in there, we've got Ian Neese, we've got a whole host of people who are at the top of their game. And I say this with such pride that when it comes to certainly planning, I rest assured that we know what we're doing. So if we needed a structure plan for this area, I feel very, very confident that it would be a piece of work that our planners would know, and they would generate it and they would work it up and they would come to us and say, this is where we're thinking, this is what we think needs to be done. Now, every single time we rejig what their priorities are, there's a loss. We are responsible for how we spend the ratepayers' money. If we are darting in a non-strategic, ad hoc fashion from this project to this project, no, start this one, try this one, do a little bit of this, that is inefficient. Inefficiency wastes people's money. We are working in an environment where sporting clubs, or just about all of them, are beating down our doors. Everybody wants better fields, better lighting, more courts. There is so much pressure on what we can provide right now. I do not want to be getting involved in projects that officers who are the experts. I am not an expert in planning. My expertise is a whole other realm or world. I come here. I have faith in the CEO to lead this organisation and to get the best people and the best jobs. So when our officers tell us something, or when they go away and they provide us a report, we have to trust that. We have to trust that that's the best, most current knowledge, and that's the best way forward. I'm just having a real issue with what I've seen a practice gaining in momentum of cherry-picking projects for whatever ideology or whatever particular group or agenda it's about, and it puts everything else that we work systematically to offside. Now, we're working in very, very difficult times. Rate capping. People have high expectations of what we can deliver, and how long is a piece of string? If I spend 100,000 on here, that's 100,000 less I get to do X, Y, or Z. I just think we have to be smarter and far more strategic about putting a notice of motions that are going to. Where's the opportunity cost? At what cost?
Thank you, Councillor Barth. Are there any other councillors that wish to comment at this stage?
I do wish to
West.
comment, Mr Mayor. I guess my concern is just that, these are all interesting issues. I'm interested to see that Councillor Hua is interested in open space for Clayton South. Clayton South is not one of the areas that's... actually it is a bit short of open space, but not nearly as short as Mentone, so I'm a bit disappointed that he wasn't also concerned about open space for Mentone. I just think it's extraordinary to be looking at a structure plan for a whole suburb, and I really can't support it on this. I think the ideas are good. Maybe there are other ways of following them up. Future plans for the non-green wedge landfill sites, we'd all like to look at that. Traffic is an issue for everywhere, but I really don't feel that this is a matter for a structure plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor West. Councillor Gledhill.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, I think we probably all need to read the first paragraph, because what Councillor Hua is asking for is officers prepare a report that would speak to the need, or I would assume otherwise, for further strategic planning work and the potential preparation of a structure plan. Now, I take the point that to do a structure plan ad hoc for a suburb is a huge task. Even the neighbourhood character work and residential strategy that the planning department is beginning to undertake is enormous work, and we've all, as councillors, discussed that. But I think what this is doing, and I applaud Councillor Hua for actually taking the initiative and saying, in an area where we're making considerable important investment in Westall, with the hub, that's, I think, one of the really the most significant things this council is going to do in an area that is really going through a period of regeneration, as I hear from the ward councillors from time to time. Significant brownfield developments that I think are going to have to be properly managed. And the Clayton Business Park site, what is it, 6,500 people or something going to live there in a variety of formats. We really do need to plan. How are they going to go around? Where are they going to work? What's it going to be like? Now, I'm not going to preempt what officers will come back with. I agree with all the comments that have been made about the expertise we have in our planning department. And I also agree with the comment that I think Councillor Oxley made about us falling behind and developers taking us to VCAT for failure to determine. And I think the remedy for that is in our own hands, and we can talk about that another time. But it's certainly a point I agree with. I think what this is saying is, and what Councillor Hua is saying is, can officers please tell us whether this type of work is warranted or not? So I think rather than be overly negative about it, I'd like to hear from officers whether they think an area that's going to grow more than any other part of Kingston over the next 10 years and has a very, very diverse community that we all acknowledge. I think it's an incredibly important part of and exciting part of Kingston over the next few years, and to be a little bit better informed about it, I would have thought that was what we all wanted to be.
Councillor Barr?
Procedural motion. Can I move that the motion be put?
Got a motion to put. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor West? Councillors in favour of the motion being put? Councillors against the motion being put? Councillors abstaining? The motion will be put. Councillors in support of the motion? Councillors against the motion? Councillors abstaining? The motion's lost.